Welcome to Stagecoach, where you'll find the best Western books on the market and the men and women who write them. This podcast is brought to you by Dusty Saddle Publishing, home of the best-selling authors in the Western genre. This is your host, Ginger Winters. Let Stagecoach take you on a ride back in time to the Old West with a brand new Mountain Man series from acclaimed Western author Scotty Casper. This has all the action and adventure of frontier America, together with a rip-roaring storyline that will keep you on the edge of your seat with unforgettable characters and frontier American settings that are as beautiful as they are deadly. Join us as we begin our story.
Finn Sullivan, Mountain Man, by Scotty V. Casper. Published by Dusty Saddle Publishing. Read by Jerry Underhill. Chapter 1. Shanghaied. Finn was nearing his 14th birthday when unexpected events descended upon him and turned his world upside down. He had to adapt or die. He was an unusually large boy for a 14-year-old, and it was obvious that if he continued growing at a rapid clip, when he reached manhood, he would be a large and powerful man. Unfortunately, Finn lost his mother at the age of 11, and he would mourn her loss the rest of his life. She died of diphtheria. He was born in Dublin, Ireland, to wealthy parents. He had red hair and freckles. His father owned a successful cotton cloth manufacturing plant named Sullivan's Cotton Cloth, Inc. At that time, Ireland was producing half of the world's cotton cloth, and there wasn't a single cotton plant growing in all of Ireland. They imported it from the southern United States, Egypt, and India. Finn spent his days at school and his afternoons helping out in the cotton cloth business. "Son, I want you to keep so busy you don't have time to mourn the loss of your dearest mother," his dad said. "I know you had a strong bond with her, and so did I. That's why I spend so much time at my work. It helps with the pain in my heart. Besides, I want you to learn all aspects of the business, so that someday when I am gone, you can take over." "I know, Papa. And I'm trying to work hard at school and at work to make you proud of me." "I'm already proud of you, son. And I know you are going to grow up to be a fine man." Finn's father loved horses, and he taught him to love them too. His father had a large stable divided into separate stalls to accommodate 40 horses, and there was a huge expanse of pasture land where the horses could get out to exercise and graze. Not only that, his father had a racetrack to give the horses strenuous exercise, because he loved racing them, and especially liked racing one of his prized possessions, a magnificent silver dust quarter horse stallion. Finn weighed about the same as a jockey, so he kept asking his father if he could ride the silver dust in one of the races. His father taught him all about horses, but he refused to let him ride in any of the races, because he said Finn needed more experience. "No, son," he had told him. "If you had an accident and got hurt, I would never forgive myself." His father had a special trailer built that was pulled by 4 draft horses, and he trailered the steel dust to the races in order to save the animal's strength for the races themselves. In fact, he raced several of his horses in outlying communities, like Coolock, Castle Rock, Clondalkin, and Carrickmine, to name a few. Dublin is located in Eastern Ireland, so he didn't have too far to attend the races in the outlying communities. One bright and sunny afternoon, Finn talked a stable hand into catching the steel dust and setting him up with a jockey's saddle and bridle. Finn decided he was a good enough rider to take the spirited animal for a couple loops around the track. He sat up on the horse just the way the jockeys do, with his legs tucked up behind him, and he used a little quirt to take the stallion around the track faster than the wind. It was exhilarating. And all went well until the stallion slowed down and then made a sudden cut through a missing railing. The horse made the cut, and Finn didn't. He continued on straight. He got a broken arm out of the caper and a scolding from his father. The stable hand was watching the run, and when Finn fell off, he could see his foot, then his head, then both feet as they popped into view above the railing as he tumbled. The stable hand had been working with Cathal's horses for nearly 10 years, but he was fired over the incident. Finn felt bad over that. Finn's father had taught him one other discipline in the evenings. He hired an elocution coach to teach Finn to use the English language like it was practiced in America. He didn't want his son going around speaking in the brogue that marked him as an Irishman. It wasn't that he was ashamed of his heritage, but he thought the boy would go farther if he went abroad without the brogue. I don't understand it, but many of the people from other countries have a disdain for the Irish, so I want you to sound just like an American. It'd be a great advantage for you. But I like the way we talk here in Ireland. I think it is colourful. Trust me, son. You'll be better off casting away the brogue. All right, Papa. You know best. Finn's father, Cathal Sullivan, had a brother named Ronan, who was his right-hand man in the cotton cloth business. Ronan was a fawning sort, and always willing to take on any task asked of him to gain favour. Cathal was taken in by him and thought he was the salt of the earth. But Finn could see through his fawning ways and recognized him for what he was, a gold digger, and a man that might someday prove to be dangerous. Finn tried to warn his father that Ronan wasn't who he appeared to be, and that he was a man capable of treachery in order to gain more power and money, but Cathal wouldn't hear of it. Ronan is indispensable around here, and faithful. I think you have it figured all wrong. Son, just let me handle things here at the factory. I understand men better than you, because I have more experience. There was another irritant in Finn's life, a woman his father was dating. His father had been dating a woman named Shauna, but he never did catch her last name. His father took her out on several dates, and he seemed to glow with happiness when he got home. Then one night he brought her to the mansion for dinner. His father deserved to be happy, but he wouldn't find happiness if he married Shauna. Finn could see right through her facade. She was nothing but a gold digger as well. Her eyes flitted all around the mansion and took in all of its riches, and her little piggy eyes lit up with greed. His father was blinded by it all. He just considered the woman cute and flirtatious. Finn took her off to the side after the dinner party. You picture yourself living here in all of this luxury. But take it from me, it is never going to happen, because I'm going to tell my father that you are nothing but a cheap little gold digger. You little brat. You do no such thing. The last thing I do when I move into his, have you sent off to a boys' academy. Ha! You can't stop it. Your father loves me. And I think he's going to propose to me this evening. Now move out of my way, so I can get into your father's study and cuddle with him a little and soften him up. Apparently, Cathal came to his senses, because he didn't propose to the woman that evening, or any other time for that matter. In fact, after that dinner party, he never mentioned her again. Then, one day, it happened. There was a carriage accident, and Cathal was killed. It looked as if the team of draft horses pulling his traveling chariot had run away, and went into a turn too fast and overturned. Cathal's body was badly damaged. He had blunt force wounds all over his torso and skull. Finn viewed his body in a casket and cried. He loved his father dearly, and he didn't know what was to become of him now that both of his parents were dead. After he finished with the crying and snuffling, he looked over his father's injuries closely and thought his injuries didn't look consistent with a carriage accident. It looked like his father had been beaten badly with a club or baton, or something like that. Ronan was standing nearby. Come on, Finn. Continuing to stare at him like that will make you sadder. Let's get you home and have the cook make you a nice meal. Then you can climb into your cozy bed. I don't want you to worry. Now that your parents are gone, I will move into the mansion and take care of you like you're my son. But I don't want you to move into our home. I just want to be left alone. Now, Finn, you don't know what you are saying. Your grief has affected your thinking. Of course you'll need me to move in and take care of you. Look at my poor father lying there. I think somebody beat him with a club and killed him. Then I think they overturned the carriage, busted it up, and put him in the wreckage. Ronan turned white. Why, Finn, that's absurd. I hardly think at the young age of 14 you were qualified to do detective work. Of course he was killed in a carriage accident, and you shouldn't be going around saying anything different. Finn saw something in his uncle's eyes he had never seen before. Hatred and evil. At that juncture, he knew for certain his uncle had killed his father. Before, he had suspected it, but he was certain now. So he shut his mouth and allowed Ronan to take him to the comforts of the mansion. He figured it wasn't wise to confront Ronan further about the matter. That is, if he wanted to stay alive and someday exact revenge for the death of his father. He went to his room in the spacious mansion and cried the entire afternoon. But in the end, he decided to buck up and quit the crying and feeling sorry for himself. He figured he had an entire lifetime ahead of him if he didn't crack under the strain. The cook called him down to supper, and he had to walk through his father's study to get to the dining room. Ronan was sitting at his father's desk, looking at documents and shuffling papers around. It infuriated him to see his Uncle Ronan at his father's desk, but he thought it was best to not say anything about it. Finn, when you finish your supper, come into the study, because I have papers for you to sign. All right. Have you eaten? I have. Finn was happy to hear that. He didn't want to sit at the table with his uncle. He sat at the table and enjoyed one of his favorite meals. Corned beef and cabbage, potato soup, Irish soda bread, and Irish coffee. He thanked Alana, the cook, and made his way to his father's study. Ronan was sitting behind his father's desk, looking like he was royalty. He was puffing on one of his father's imported cigars, and he put it in an ashtray and stapled his fingers on the desk in front of him. Finn, this is your father's will. He has given everything to you. As soon as you sign these papers, you will be the sole stockholder in the cotton cloth factory. And you will own this house and land. You will own these horses, the horse track, several parcels of land, and Dublin. I'm his only close relative, so it doesn't come as a surprise to me that I have inherited everything. Well, Finn, I must say that this is a disappointment to me. I'd rather thought he would leave me something, considering that the success of the Sullivan's Cotton Cloth Inc. is partially due to my efforts. Don't worry. I will retain you as the vice president of the company with your current salary. Ha! You don't know the first thing about running the cotton cloth company. So that means I will recover more money. Let's say you should double my salary. Ronan, I'll increase your salary by 25%, and that's it. Either accept it or clean out your desk and get out. You whelp! You dare to speak to me like that? Yes. Accept the increase in your salary or get out. All right, for now, I'll accept the tiny raise, but after you see how indispensable I am at Sullivan's Cotton Cloth Inc., you'll come to your senses and pay me more money. Just then, the doorman ushered one of the company's attorneys into the study, and he took Finn through the myriad documents, each of which he signed, and just like that, he was the sole stockholder in the cotton cloth factory, and sole owner of his father's entire estate. After he signed everything, he went to his room, and the lawyer and Ronan sat in the study, smoking cigars and drinking his father's brandy. Maybe it was just his imagination, but Finn thought they were conspiring against him. 3 months passed, and Finn continued his schooling with a tutor and an elocutionist coach that came in 3 times a week and helped him speak like an American. And he spent many of his afternoons working at the factory. Then, one day, his Uncle Ronan entered his room and told him they shouldn't continue paying a tutor and elocutionist, that he was smart enough and spoke well enough. "I'm going to sell the racetrack, and all of the horses too. It is a waste of money. I'm tired of spending so much time and money with those horses." Finn's broken arm had long since healed, and he spent many afternoons riding the magnificent steel dust stallion. "You will not sell those horses," Finn said. "You don't own those horses. I do. And if you sell them, I will fire you from your job at the cotton cloth factory and put the law onto you, you miserable little whelp. If it wasn't for me, that cotton factory would go bankrupt. I'm going to sell the horses and keep the money. I will consider it the inheritance I should have received when my brother was killed in that carriage accident. Like I said, if you do, I will put the law onto you. Further, I might have them open an investigation into my father's death. I think he was purposefully killed, and I think you're responsible." Ronan's face turned white, and he shook with rage. Then he hauled off and punched Finn in the face, and proceeded to pummel him. But he got a surprise when Finn punched him back. The blow caught him square in the face, and he went down with a broken nose. It took Ronan a few minutes for his head to clear, and then he gave Finn a thorough beating. But in doing so, he got hit a couple more times, and quite hard. Finn acquitted himself admirably in the fight for only being 13 years old, but he did end up spending a week in bed before he could get up and move around. He suspected he had a couple broken ribs. Ronan didn't want the authorities to know he had severely beaten a minor, so he refused to bring in a doctor. While Ronan was at work, one of the female servants patched Finn up the best she could. He refused to tell her what happened to him, but she suspected Ronan had given him a beating. None of the servants liked Ronan because he treated them all with disdain. Ronan told the workers at the cotton cloth factory that he fell down a flight of stairs and injured his face. None of them believed him because it didn't make sense. If a man falls down a flight of stairs, he generally injures legs, arms, and torso, and Ronan didn't appear to have any of those injuries. He was widely disliked at work as well, because he was mean and imperialistic with the workers. As a result, production was off and the profits were in decline. Finn stayed in his room for a week to let his injuries heal. Then he saddled one of the horses that Ronan kept to pull the remaining horse carriage and went to visit a lawyer friend. The lawyer's name was Lorcan Murphy. Finn's father had trusted Lorcan explicitly. "He's one of the few men I completely trust," his father had said. Lorcan invited Finn into his parlor. "What can I do for you, young man?" Lorcan asked. "I was sorry to hear about your father. I counted him as one of my best friends." "Thank you, sir. I'm here to offer you a deal that can change your life. I would like to offer you a 49% share in Sullivan's Cotton Clothing." Lorcan shook his head in amazement. "Why would you do such a thing? Didn't Cathal leave Ronan a half share in the company?" "No, he left Ronan nothing, and I don't trust the man. Ronan has moved into the mansion, and he is bossing everyone around at work, and he beat me up a week ago. I think he is capable of killing me to gain control of the company. Further, I think he killed my father. Those are serious allegations. I would suggest you keep that suspicion to yourself until you have positive proof." "I know they are serious allegations. So, are you interested in taking a 49% share in the company? Of course, I will maintain a 51% share and control of the company. That saves Ronan with nothing. Now at this point, you haven't made a dime. All of the money in the bank is mine. Oh, the real estate is mine. It is all mine. But you will start earning from the instant we finish up with the papers. That's fair. And I should say, you are very precocious for a 13-year-old. Finn and Lorcan spent 2 hours drawing up papers and signing everything, including a share certificate. Lorcan brought in a notary of the public that put his stamp on the certificate, making it legal. At that time, Lorcan warned the notary to keep the transaction under his hat. We don't want this getting out yet, because it might cause some difficulty with Finn's Uncle Ronan. Mum's the word, the notary said. I can't believe this, Finn, Lorcan said. You have just made me an instant millionaire. You are welcome. Now don't let me down. If I am absent at times, I will expect you to put my share of the profits in my bank account. Can you do that? Of course. Finn gave Lorcan the 49% share in the cotton company just in the nick of time. Because during that evening, Ronan brought out some papers and tricked Finn into signing the company over to him. Finn should have read the documents more closely before he signed. Then Ronan slipped some knockout drops in Finn's tea and hauled him down to the Dublin seaport. When Finn woke the next morning, he found himself in the damp, malodorous hull of an ocean-going vessel. He had been shanghaied, and he was locked up in the hull along with an old man named Cash Jackson. Chapter 2. Enslaved on the Tamo Shanter. Cash was asleep, so Finn went over and shook him. Where are we? Finn asked. Cash shook his head a little in order to clear the cobwebs.
First of all, what's your name, laddie?
Finn Sullivan. What's yours?
Cash Jackson.
Cash was in his 60s, but he was in fine condition considering his age. He had developed a little bit of a belly, but it was obvious that in his prime he had been a large and powerful man. He had a salt and pepper beard, and he had the most beautiful blue eyes Finn had ever seen. Where are we, Cash?
Finn, we're in the hull of an ocean-going sailing ship. I hate telling you this, but you've been shanghaied.
What does that mean?
It means you've been taken on board a ship against your will, and you're going to be forced to work, and the food is going to be poor. You're possibly in for some cruel treatment. I wish I could tell you different, but I figured you needed to know the truth of it.
My dastardly Uncle Ronan did this to me, so he could take over Sullivan's cotton cloth company. Just then, a couple rats went running through the hold, and Finn drew back in horror. Cash laughed.
It's only a couple rats. They're all over the place. When things get rough around here, you'll be happy to see 'em and make a pretty good meal.
Well, I'll never eat one of those hideous creatures. Cash laughed some more.
Don't say that. If you get hungry enough, you'll change your tune.
Finn ignored that statement. How long have you been on this ship?
Well, man sort of loses track out here, sailing on the 7 seas, but I reckon I've been slaving on this ship for nearly a year.
Were you shanghaied as well?
Yes. Some rogue knocked me on the head in a New Orleans tavern. Next morning I found myself on this ship. I'm not gonna lie to you. Staying alive on this ship isn't easy.
Oh, why's that?
Malnourishment is the worst killer. A man can get carried off with scurvy, dirty water, Muller's disease, Cheadle's. Most of those horrible diseases are brought on by the lack of vitamin C. Then there's shipboard accidents, murder, being whipped to death over minor infractions. The list goes on, boy.
Well, I'm going to escape, Finn said. Cash laughed.
That's easier said than done. If you figure out how to escape, be sure and take me with you.
Why are you in this hold?
I got caught stealing a few sips of molasses.
Finn looked around the hold. He could see several large timbers holding up the top part of the ship, and he could see the ship's ribbing. It all looked sturdy enough. Cash, what's behind that door with the padlock?
That's where they keep the food stores. There are barrels of fish and meat and other foodstuffs. It's all dried, salted, or smoked. And most of it tastes like hell because it's been spoiling and full of weevils.
What do they feed us lowly sorts?
They feed us hardtack biscuits in this god-awful stew. You'll eat that crap until you think you'll go insane.
We don't get any of the fish or meat.
Very little. It is reserved for Captain Brady Walsh and his officers.
I see.
Don't get caught stealing any foodstuffs, or they'll strip your shirt off, tie you to a mast, and flay the hide off your back with a whip. Some men have been whipped so badly that they've died.
Suddenly, the hold was flooded with light. A sailor had opened the hatch and descended the ladder. Look sharp there, lads. Master Lindsay wants you topside to swab the decks from the mizzenmast to the stern. 4 of the landlubbers are responsible for swabbing the deck around the main deck and the foredeck. He's divided the work into sections for you, vermin. Look lively now. I'll be down here for a few minutes fetching some food for our suppers. Who are you? Finn asked. I'm Petty Officer Stern, responsible for mending sails. What's the name of this ship? Finn asked. This is the Tamo Shanter, built in England in 1830. A lovely ship she be. She's 104 feet 8 inches from bow to stern, and 28 feet 8 inches from the starboard to the port side. A big old beast she be. She weighs 383 tons.
You proud of her, eh?
Cash asked. Yes, and you should be too, as long as you are aboard. Where are we sailing to? Finn asked. We're carrying foodstuffs to India. It's curious that half of Ireland is starving to death, but there's enough food to export to foreign ports. We're sailing to India with a license from the British East Indies Company. When do we eat? Finn asked. That's enough questions. Now scurry up the ladder, start swabbing the deck. Look lively now. Later, the ship's first mate met Finn and Cash on the deck, backed by the mizzenmast. Cash, I hope you have learned your lesson about stealing foodstuffs from this ship.
Yes, sir. I learned my lesson.
Nevertheless, you're going to spend an extra 3 days in the hold with this lad. He pointed to Finn. I want you to teach him what is expected of him on this ship, because if he doesn't catch on really fast, it is not going to go well for him.
Yes, sir.
Now I want you to teach this laddie how to swab the deck around the mizzenmast. I also want you to wash the gun carriages, port seals, and the head and head sails. I'll be for flaying the hide from thy backs if these items do not sparkle.
We'll do our best,
Cash said.
Come on, laddie. I'll get you started.
Finn got down on his knees and started to swab the deck. The sun beat down unrelenting, so he removed his shirt, and was to find out later he left the shirt off too long, because he got a sunburn that gave him the miseries when he ended up back down in the hold. His hide hurt so bad he couldn't stand anything to touch it, and he got the chills that stayed with him all through the night, and there was nothing that Cash could do to help him. Finn was red-headed, and he had pale Irish skin, so he burned badly. He crawled around on the deck and his knees started hurting, and they, as well, continued hurting throughout the night. Before they finished swabbing the decks, they were called to supper. Cash and Finn got called into supper before they finished the swabbing deck. The first mate told them to go back and finish the job after supper, and they were to finish it even if it took them long into the night. The kitchen was blazing hot. The stove was fit into a large hearth and was mounted on a thick layer of sand and bricks to ensure the stove didn't ignite the ship on fire. Large pots were fitted into holes in the top of the stove with beef and pork in the pots, and the aforementioned stew was in another pot, and that was what was served to the lowly deckhands, along with hardtack full of weevils.
Just pick the weevils from the hardtack and eat heartily,
Cash told Finn.
Eat it whether you like it or not. Always eat what they offer you, no matter how unsavory. You gotta keep up your strength if you hope to survive.
The cook slopped the stew into their bowls and gave them a couple pieces of hardtack. Everybody else had a seat at the table, but Cash and Finn had to eat standing up, or find a place to sit with their back against a spar or bulkhead. You've got 5 minutes to eat, and then I want you back swabbing the deck, the first mate said. The stew tasted like mud, and the hardtack was hard enough to break teeth. After supper, Cash and Finn went back to swabbing the deck. It turned dark, and the sea turned rough because of the 5-foot swells propagated by a distant storm. Finn grew seasick.
"Finn, don't you dare puke on the deck we just scrubbed. Get over to the rail and let her go into the ocean. When I first went to the sea, I got sick too. You'll get used to it after a while. It's a strange thing. Some lucky people never get seasick."
After Finn was done throwing up the stew and hardtack, he felt terrible and weak. The first mate came by to inspect their job with the use of a lantern filled with whale oil. "I suppose this job's good enough, but I'll expect better next time. Finish the little bit you have left and then climb back down into the hold. I want to get some sleep, so I'm expecting you to follow my orders. Or else." Just as they were finishing up, one of the ship's carpenters walked back to the mizzenmast and grabbed Finn's Irish flat cap off of his head.
"Thanks, laddie. I lost my cap the other day, and this one here fits me perfectly."
"Give me back my cap, you son of a bitch," Finn said as he grabbed for his cap, but the carpenter jerked it out of reach and slapped him across the face. Cash had seen enough. He wrestled the carpenter down on the deck and grabbed the hat and threw it over to Finn.
"Old man, you just made a terrible mistake," the carpenter said, "because I'm going to cut your throat with this knife."
He pulled a long knife from a sheath and got on top of Cash and started pushing the knife downward toward his throat. Cash was holding the knife away from his throat with both hands, but he was losing the struggle as the knife sank lower and lower. "Get off of him," Finn yelled.
"Shut up, Will. You're next,"
the carpenter warned back. Cash's arms were starting to tremble. Finn was desperate and grabbed a belaying pin from the pin rails inside the bulkhead and hit the carpenter over the head. He swung with all of his might and knocked the fellow senseless. Cash rolled onto his knees and felt the fellow's pulse. There was none.
"Laddie, you've done killed him."
"Oh no. What do we do?"
"We dump him overboard and not say a word about it. If they find out you killed him, they will either hang you or keel-haul you."
They grunted and heaved and managed to lift the carpenter up on the rail and then push him over into the sea. They heard a little splash when he hit the water. "What's keel-hauling?" Finn asked.
"They tie a rope around you and drag you under the ship. The bottom of the ship has barnacles all over it, and it tears hell out of a man's hide. It's usually fatal."
"What a wicked thing to do to a man."
"Yeah, lady, ain't it? Now let's wash the blood off of the deck and climb down into the hole. Oh, and thank you for saving my life. I owe you."
"Cash, I feel just awful. I've never killed a man before. I didn't mean to kill him. I just wanted him all for you."
"You had it coming. You'll get over it."
Finn had a miserable night in the hold. His knees ached from crawling around on the deck. He had the chills brought on by the sunburn, and he was still seasick.
"Hang in there, laddie. You'll get stronger as the days go by. I went through the same problems when the rogues brought me onto this ship. We'll both get stronger as time goes by, and we'll keep alert, waiting for a chance to escape."
"Thanks for the encouraging words," Finn said. He could hear rats scurrying around in the dark. "Cash, do those dang rats ever bite?"
"Nah, but it's possible to catch a disease off of them, because they are nasty things. So just try to not step into any of their droppings with your bare feet. I think it's a good idea to keep your clogs on the whole time you are down here."
"Cash, you told me you got shanghaied in New Orleans. What were you doing there?"
"I was having a little fling. I sold my furs to the American Fur Company owned by John Jacob Astor in St. Louis. I took a sternwheeler down to New Orleans to have a little fun. I had a pocket full of money to spend."
"You sold furs? Where did you get the furs?"
"Out in Montana? I was a mountain man and fur trapper."
"Are you serious? A mountain man?"
"Yep, I did some trapping all through the West. I know the West like the back of my hand."
"Did you ever kill Indians?" Finn asked.
"I did, 'cause they had it coming. But I also had several Indians that were my friends, and I was married to a squaw. Indians are just like white people. Some are good and some are bad.
I've heard the West is a wonderful place.
Sonny, there's no place like it. There are canyon, red rock ramparts, verdant valleys, prairies, forests, deserts, mountains that reach clear up into the clouds.
I'd sure like to see those wondrous things. I'd sure like to trap furs and be a mountain man.
I'll take you out west, laddie, if we ever figure out a way to get off this ship.
Thank you, Cash. Would love that.
Now tell me about yourself.
Finn described his life as a rich man's son in Dublin. He described the life of luxury he once experienced, then explained how his greedy, treacherous uncle had killed his father and put him on the ship.
So you hold the major share in a cotton cloth factory?
Cash asked. Yes, unless Ronan figured out how to steal it away from Lorcan and myself. I gave Lorcan a 49% share.
Maybe someday we'll get a chance to sail to Ireland and settle your Uncle Ronan's hash.
Yeah, perhaps.
Laddie, how is it you don't sound much like an Irishman?
Father hired an elocutionist that taught me to speak like Americans.
I see that. Mostly. That would probably come in handy if we ever get back to America.
The following morning, the first mate opened the hatch and told Cash and Finn to climb topside, that they were having a meeting that included the entire ship's crew. Finn had trouble climbing the ladder because he was nauseous, which was brought on by all of his recently acquired ailments. Master Lindsay was apparently agitated, and he was addressing the crew.
The ship's carpenter, a sailor by the name of Hank, has gone missing. We suspect foul play. Does anyone here have any idea what happened to him?
The question was met by complete silence.
All right, does anyone here have a theory as to what befell the man?
Silence.
Does anyone here have any suspicions on what happened to Hank?
Sir, the first mate said, at around 9 last evening he said he was going onto the deck to get some air. Cash and Finn were the only ones on the deck at that time. They were swabbing the deck back by the mizzenmast.
Wait right here, I'll be back in a minute,
Master Lindsay said. He walked back and looked all around the mizzenmast. He must have been looking for blood. Finn held his breath. Had they cleaned every trace of the carpenter's blood off the deck? He was so weak and scared that it was all he could do to keep from wetting his pants. When he and Cash washed the blood from the deck, it had been quite dark. Maybe they'd missed some blood. Had they smeared blood on the rail when they shoved the carpenter over and into the sea? Master Lindsay walked back and stood before the crew.
I don't see any signs of foul play back there.
He looked over at Cash and Finn.
Did either of you miserable curs kill our carpenter? No, of course not,
Cash said. No, Finn said.
All right, everybody, go back to work for now. But if I find I was killed the ship's carpenter, that unfortunate soul will be keel-hauled. Maybe he just fell overboard,
Cash said.
That's unlikely. He was an experienced sailor.
After everybody dispersed, the first mate went over and looked over the area around the mizzenmast. The light of day shows me you two didn't do such a great job swabbing after all. So I want you to have another go at it this morning. When Finn got down on his knees, they hurt so bad from swabbing the deck the day before that he could hardly stand it, and he was sick, and he was weak and nauseous.
Laddie, I'll swab the deck, and you swab the gun carriages, port sills, and the head sills. You can do that work standing. This will give your knees a chance to heal.
Are you sure?
Of course I'm sure. Get to it. But at a later date, when your knees get accustomed to kneeling on the deck, I'll expect your help.
Cash, how often will we have to swab the deck?
Once a week.
Finn shook his head in wonder. That doesn't make sense. When we swab the deck, it doesn't look all that dirty to me. Why are they so fussy about it?
They like the deck swabbed for other reasons than just keeping it clean. The salt water keeps the fungus away. If we didn't swab the deck, mushrooms would grow in the wood. Further, the salt water swells the wood and prevents water from seeping down into the hold. Get enough water down there and we would sink.
Thanks for the information, Finn said. That makes me more willing to swab the blasted deck. Life carried on as usual. Cash and Finn got pulled from the hold, and they slept in hammocks topside. They were given an assortment of work to do, repairing sails, quartermaster work, keeping watch, and, of course, swabbing the deck. During their off time, they socialized with the other lowly sailors, and they told stories, played games, repaired clothing, and learned how to scrimshaw on animal bones and coconuts. Finally, it was that time once again to swab the decks, but Cash figured out a way to swab the decks that made it much easier. He found swabs in a closet that had long handles. They could do the work standing up. Apparently, the petty officer knew about these long-handled swabs, but he'd been content to have them get down on their knees to do the swabbing with rags, because he didn't care about their knees. He didn't care about them, period. Cash and Finn finished the job much faster standing up, so the petty officer sent them to the mainmast area to help that crew. After that, when they swabbed the deck, they slowed down so they weren't sent elsewhere on other projects. Finn soon felt better. His knees had mended, and he no longer suffered from seasickness, and he always took care to avoid sunburns. He did rather enjoy being on the ocean. He saw porpoise, flying fish, breaching whales, sailfish, and many other wonders. The sunsets and sunrises at sea were spectacular, and he grew fond of the smell of salt water and the feel of gentle breezes against his skin. But even so, his mind was tormented because he was held captive and forced to work hard without pay. For that reason, he was resolved to escape when an opportunity presented itself. Chapter 3. The Storm. Nearly an entire year went by, and Finn grew larger and stronger. He was 15 years old and nearly 6 feet tall and 160 pounds. The Tamo Shanter sailed to exotic lands around the globe. At times, they sailed out of ports like Chester, London, Yarmouth, Bristol, Southampton, and Newcastle. Finn didn't sail out of all the aforementioned ports in his first year at sea, but he did over a 2-year span. Cash and he looked for a means of escape when they sailed into a port, but they had no luck because they were watched more closely during those times. During early morning in May, they were about 500 miles off the eastern coast of America, when a bad storm kicked up its heels, and before long the Tamo Shanter found itself in the grip of a hurricane. Luckily, the crew had a little time to prepare for the storm. Finn and Cash were asked to assist 2 other sailors to take down the back sails, so the wind wouldn't blow the ship sideways and all would be lost. A broached ship is usually a doomed ship. Then they managed to lower the midship sails, and finally they lowered the sails on the jib a bit. In so doing, they gave the Tamo Shanter a fairly decent chance of survival. It would have been even better if they would have had time to put up stronger, more durable sails, but there was no time for that. The storm was upon them, and the sails up front got tattered. "Remain on board and hang on for dear life," Captain Walsh said. Now it was the helmsman's job to keep the speed up and keep the ship meeting each giant wave head-on, but at a slight angle, and it was imperative to keep the rudder in the water in order to maintain control of the vessel. Captain Walsh shouted, trying to be heard above the raging storm. "We have a better chance of surviving this beast because we are loaded heavy. The storm can't throw us around quite so much. Now, you landlubbers, do you understand why I insisted on stowing the cargo correctly and strapping it down? If it got sliding around, we'd be lost for sure." Finn had learned to hate all of the officers on the sailing vessel, but he had to begrudgingly admit that they reacted admirably during the hurricane. If nothing else, they were brave men, and he particularly admired the helmsman. He didn't know how the fella managed to continue steering the vessel, head-on into the towering waves. The crew was being lashed by high winds and splattered with freezing water. Huge waves slopped upon the deck, threatening to wash everyone overboard. But eventually, the water flooded back into the sea through the scuppers. The crew held to anything solid they could take hold of to keep from being washed overboard, but the boatswain lost his grip and went over. Finn would forever be haunted by the man's scream as he sailed over the side and was dragged to Davy Jones' locker. Finn wondered at the time, if they survived the storm, who would replace the boatswain and be responsible for the ship's maintenance. But his thought on that was fleeting, because his mind was primarily occupied with surviving the storm. Finn and Cash both had a death grip on a bulkhead.
Cash, I'd never been so scared. I've always had a dread of drowning. I think I wet my pants, but I can't be sure 'cause I'm already soaked with seawater.
Cash laughed.
Don't worry about it. Under the circumstances, you are fully justified in pissing yourself. Hold on, son, hold on. We're all scared. Hopefully this thing won't last much longer.
Lightning lit up the wounded sky in fragments, and the light was shattered into shards by wind-driven rain, and thunderclaps went off like cannon fire. It was a hellish storm. All of the sailors were shaking badly, both from fear and being soaked to the skin by freezing water. Finn could hear some of the men uttering prayers and asking the Creator for forgiveness for earlier transgressions. Under other circumstances, he would have laughed over it. He even put in a little prayer himself, asking forgiveness for some of the lustful thoughts he'd had about girls back in Dublin. Before long, the storm passed over, and a couple hours later, the sun came out and the wind died down, and they found themselves floating idly on a calm sea. The water didn't have the slightest ripple, and the ship floated there, wounded and immobile. The first mate decided that was a good time to make the needed repairs and to get the ship ready for when the wind came back and the ship once again could get under way. Everybody was given a specific chore. Finn and Cash were put on a crew tasked with pulling nearly every sail down and making needed repairs. Once they struck the first sail and stretched it out on the deck, it became evident to Finn that he didn't know how to repair a torn sail. "How do you do this?" he asked Cash.
It's not that hard,
Cash said.
I'll take this sail, for instance. It's not torn up all that bad, so we can sew in several patches using waxed twine.
They set about sewing in a couple patches, and they pulled the sail back up and affixed it to the mast. Next, they had to install new rigging. Everything needed to make the repairs was stowed away on the ship. The ship even had a couple extra spars if they were needed, and it was a good thing because one of the spars was broken in half. Finn was glad he wasn't on the crew that was tasked with replacing a spar, because it looked extremely hard and dangerous. Finn and Cash, with 2 other sailors, spent the entire afternoon repairing sails. 2 of the sails were torn so badly that they had to be replaced with brand new sails that had been stowed away in the hold. One of the sailors, named Rory Byrne, who had been helping with the sail repair work, gave Finn a shove. He was a brutish-looking fellow that looked like he had been in several fights. He might even have been a prize fighter at one time, because he had scar tissue around his eyes, a broken nose, and cauliflower ears.
Why did you shove me?
Finn asked.
'Cause I don't like you,
Rory said.
Why? Several reasons. You prance around like you're a nobleman. You and this old man here did a lousy job sewing these sails, and I think one of you is responsible for killing the ship's carpenter and tossing him overboard.
None of what you say is true, Finn said, and he gave Rory a shove back. Rory lost his balance and actually fell down. He bounded back onto his feet and roared like a wounded lion, and started throwing fists at Finn. He went headhunting and threw several combinations. Finn had never been in a fistfight, so he had to rely on instinct. He moved his head left and right and let Rory's fists whistle on by, and he picked a couple other fists off with his shoulders and forearms. He was desperate, though. He knew if he got caught with one of the fists, that he would more than likely end up dead, because the brute wouldn't hesitate to jump on him and kick him while he was down.
"You little bastard, hold still!"
Rory wailed.
"Not on your life,"
Finn said, as he flicked out a left jab and caught Rory flush in the face. And then he brought in a hook that hit Rory right over his liver. None of the punches he threw seemed to affect Rory in the slightest, and Finn knew he was in desperate trouble. Then the whole affair came to a sudden halt when Cash hit Rory right across the back of his head with a belaying pin. But he didn't hit the ruffian hard enough to kill him, just hard enough to knock him unconscious.
Son, I decided to help you out. You're not quite big enough just yet to handle a monster like this fella. You gotta grow some. I'll say this for you. You got sand. I wouldn't hesitate to ride the river with you.
What does all that mean? Finn asked.
It's a expression we use out west. A man with sand has courage. And we choose to ride the river with a man with grit. It's safer that way.
I see. Thank you, Cash. But I was just trying to keep from getting killed. The petty officer came walking up. What's going on here? Why is Rory unconscious?
I hit him in the head with a belaying pin, keep him from beating Finn to death. He just started heaping abuse on Finn and then started in to beat him down with those huge fists of his. It wasn't a fair fight, so I hit him in the back of the head.
The petty officer threw a bucket of water in Rory's face and brought him around. This thing ends right here. We have barely enough sailors as it is to sail the ship, and I don't want anyone killed. If you so much as look crosswise at Finn or Cash, I'll put you in irons. Do you understand?
Yeah, but I can't let this pass.
Shut your gob, Rory. Leave these two sailors strictly alone, or you'll be in irons until we reach land. And then you'll face an admiralty court that has jurisdiction over maritime law. All right. That evening, when they climbed in their hammocks, Cash was very talkative.
Finn, I was proud of you today. You stood up to that bullet, knowing full well you didn't have a chance beating him in a skull and knuckles contest.
Cash, I was scared.
I know you were. But you fought him off the best you could without a whimper. Any man that goes into a fight and says he isn't scared is a damn liar. It's all right to be scared, but fight with everything you have. I did a little prize fighting around New Orleans when I was younger, and I got in quite a few scuffles when I was trapping out west. Do you want me to teach you what I know about fist fighting?
Yes, of course.
All right, well, when we get a chance, we'll do a little sparring when nobody's watching. For now, I'll tell you a few things to help you out when you get in your next fight.
Finn nodded his head and grinned big. Go for it, he said.
Conserving energy during a fight is important. Don't make any unnecessary movements. Don't double up your fists until you throw a punch. Just the act of squeezing your fist tight during all the fight will tire out your arms in a hurry.
That makes sense.
Don't telegraph your punches either. Don't arrange your fists a certain way before you throw each punch. Your opponent will soon get onto it. Throw your first from whatever position it is in at that instant. Throw it fast. And retreat it to guard against a counterpunch.
Finn nodded.
Counterpunching is important. When your opponent throws a left jab, come over the top of it with your right. Do your best to take his head plumb off.
All right.
Don't leave your head in one place and make it a stationary target. And don't let your opponent start backing you up. It's harder to fight backpedaling.
Gotcha.
Alright, I'll tell you one last thing that should help, and then I'll go more in depth later. You'll be much bigger and stronger later on. And if we're able to go out west, I want you to be able to handle yourself.
He chuckled.
I'm getting old. I'll need you to protect me. Now for the last tip for this evening. Work over your opponent's body, and he'll lower his guard. Then you can go head on. Fist fighting, like some believe, isn't really a science. Generally speaking, the one that punches the other one in the face the most times, that'll be the winner.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Stagecoach, brought to you by Dusty Saddle Publishing, the home of Western excellence, where the best of the Western authors can be found. Visit our website at dspublishingnetwork.com. Please join us for our next episode as we continue with the adventures of Finn Sullivan, Mountain Man, by Scotty V. Casper. Please hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss an episode of the Stagecoach.